All right, we're on. Ryan Fredricey, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having
It's
me.
my brother.
Yeah.
You were just asking me the goal of whatever this is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the noble side of me, honestly, sees what's happening in the media, sees that they're nothing but a mouthpiece for the left. And worse than that, even local media isn't covering the human tragedy of what's happening in our world with COVID, with postmodernism, with the rise of the left. Maybe if I get lucky, I can expose some of that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would be you should be on the radio or something. You'd be good at it.
Well, I definitely have a face for radio. It turns out I don't know how to do a podcast, so we're doing YouTube instead.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of it. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been called the greatest mind of our generation, I guess.
Yeah.
Stable genius.
Yeah.
Well, I guess politically, I feel like I'm one of the few people left that is not Republican or Democrat, not a Trump supporter, not a Trump hater. I mean, I feel like especially with Trump, I feel like there's so many people who had Trump derangement syndrome, were anti-Trump, or were part of the cult of Trump. And I feel like people got so swept up in what is his behavior or his tweets that they kind of forgot about what are the policies he's implementing. So I feel like if you even ask a Trump supporter, most of them, what do you like about Trump? I don't think most of them can name more than one or two things.
Yeah. So do you think it's divided into those two camps, really? Like Trump supporters and leftists? Are we at that stage in American political milieu?
I mean, certainly before Trump, there was Democrats and Republicans, but I think it shifted into Trump and anti-Trump.
Because you said you feel like you're one of the last people that is doesn't identify with either of these two groups.
Yep.
And you think these two groups are so prevalent that there's just nothing else outside of that political realm. I mean, there is the Libertarian Party. We still have the Green Party hanging on and these kinds of things. Although I think the left has built a coalition. I think the left is pretty well organized and together. Whether you're far left, left of center, they have really coalesced around the what I would call straw men that they purport to be their causes.
Yep.
You know, these pseudo moral causes that they pretend is what they champion, and when it boils down to it, they really don't. They don't care about women. They don't care about gays. They don't care about the environment. They care about leftism. They care about the state controlling everything and using the full power of the state to sort of implement their version of social justice. But that's interesting that, I mean, I consider myself a Trump supporter, but I don't consider myself. I am. I wholeheartedly voted for him twice.
Yeah.
Now, when the 2012 election, when the 2016 election campaigns began, I was a Cruz guy, and I thought Trump just wasn't a conservative, and so I couldn't support him. And he's not. He's this nationalist figure, but he has been surprisingly conservative in his behavior, his policies, his actions.
Yep. No, he did way better than I thought he would. In fact, so I voted for him 2020, and that's the first time I voted for Republican in 20 years, probably. Yeah. But it wasn't a vote for him, and it wasn't even a vote against Biden, which I feel like normal elections are that way. You're voting for a candidate or against the other candidate. Yeah. This time for me, it was not, especially because I was kind of the tail end of the BLM riots, and it was an anti-leftist. If I'm anything, I'm an anti-leftist libertarian. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that was a vote to, even if Trump didn't win, I thought the more votes he gets, I definitely don't want a Biden landslide, because that's going to be a referendum to say, hey, we support this leftist BLM riot kind of thing going on. So
I think there were a lot of people that felt that way.
Yeah.
The way you felt. And as far as voting against the candidate, let's assume, I don't know if we want to go into Dominion and all the crazy stuff. We could, because it's important. But let's assume that Joe Biden got 80 million votes. I'm willing to assume that. I'm willing to also entertain the idea and the real possibility that he didn't. Let's assume he did. those votes overwhelmingly had to be against Donald Trump, don't you think?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean,
nobody voted for Biden. Yeah.
How could they?
Yeah.
Really? But they did vote against the Trump movement, the Trump. I don't know if I want to say doctrine, but the Trump America, right?
Yeah, and I worry that he had a net negative impact on the culture war. I care more about the culture war that's going on than I do, I guess, about the policies and politics that are happening right now. And on one hand, people coalesced around him in an anti-leftist movement. And to the extent I like his behavior, there's a lot of things I don't like, but I like that he was not afraid to fight against, wokeism and leftism. But I also feel like the better tactic would have been somebody who's that strongly against it, but took a more, polished approach to it. And I think he could have taken some people that were in the middle that could have been swung towards, being anti-left. And I think he divided that middle group a little bit more than they could have been. I think they tended to be more anti-Trump than they became more anti-leftist. And I think that was a net negative that he had in that middle group.
Well, not to mention the first debate with Biden. That was a train wreck.
Oh, yeah.
Did that cost him votes?
Probably. Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
As a Trump supporter, I thought it was horrendous.
Yeah, yep.
Horrendous. Embarrassing.
It was embarrassing.
And he didn't have to do it because he's smarter. He's, of course we know the character of this guy. He's bombastic. He says things he shouldn't. I railed against his tweets early on until I realized without him he's not Trump, and so let him be who he is. But I think in the end, some of it was his undoing.
Yeah.
And then the culmination of COVID and the perceived response to it, because if we want to really delve into that, I think his actual response to COVID was beautiful, phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the visual wasn't that good. Like he stood up there. You could tell, man, I don't like masks. I don't like. I want freedom, which is I think how a lot of Americans felt.
Yeah.
But the propaganda coming from the left, from the media, from the people who were legitimately scared, just overtook that narrative. And I think that most people would have liked to see him say, hey, let's get through this. Let's fight hard. Let's do this. I'm not saying I agree with that, because I'm kind of a, I'm a freedom first kind of guy. I don't know if we want to delve too much into COVID, but yeah, the election was an interesting thing. Just to spend 30 seconds on it, Dominion was the program, was the computers tainted, rigged?
I would need to see more solid evidence. I'm sure that there was, I don't know if you call it, I'm sure there's fraud this election, just as there is probably every other election, and maybe it was even more this time. It should be looked into more. I still err on the side that it didn't change the results. The results were what they were.
That's what the evidence seems to suggest. And I'm open to the idea that maybe there's more evidence that we haven't seen yet. But we have had state Supreme Courts. We've had, just this week, the United States Supreme Court rejected, I think, 3 cases, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and one other case, decided not to hear the case.
Yep.
And I thought that Justice Thomas wrote a very scathing and very brilliant dissent on that opinion of the court. Obviously not a case opinion, but the opinion not to hear it. And so that's going to be interesting moving forward. I think that they skated their responsibility. It is something that the Supreme Court should have heard. If nothing else, to put an end to it so we can move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, however many dozens of lower court, when the Trump campaign brought these, like, we think there's cheating and fraud, and there just so many Trump-appointed judges rejected it. I mean, maybe they're thinking it's not worth it, even if there was fraud. I mean, because there was that rumor too that Supreme Court, like behind the closed doors, are saying it's not. We don't want to rehash like 2000 election.
Well, there's a history of the Supreme Court not wanting to immerse itself into politics.
Yeah.
And so I think that made a play this week for sure.
Yeah.
And I hope not, because guess what? Sometimes the law crosses politics, and that's when you're needed the most. That's when the highest court in the land needs to hear these cases. Tell us legally where we're at on them.
Yeah.
So yeah, we could do 5 hours on Dominion on the election. I mean, I would end that topic by saying that I think, from the evidence that I see today that I've looked at, the left just simply outsmarted the right once again. State legislatures were able to change voting laws to all mail-in, to late ballots being submitted, all of these kinds of things. You could say it was fraud, and like you said, we should hear that. We should let that play out. But I think they outsmarted us again. And of course, now their goal is going to be to make these types of voting permanent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are your thoughts on mail-in? I mean, I feel like we've done it pretty well in Colorado for a while.
Well, we have, except if you look at the fact that ever since we started doing mail-in ballots, Colorado's become a blue state, and it's very solidly blue now. So
that's demographics, right?
Maybe I'm ticked that that Democrats do better with mail-in, and so maybe that's not maybe that's me showing my partisanship. Hey, when you have to go to the polls, Republicans win. Hey, when people are allowed to mail in, Democrats win.
Yeah.
I think I'm not convinced that it is not an easily manipulated system, mail-in ballot. I will agree that Colorado has done it very well.
Yeah.
And in the presidential election, states that were new to it probably did not do it very well.
Yeah.
So I'm agnostic on mail-in ballot, other than the partisan side of me says, hey, I know that when everybody, and again, this is probably because Democrats have a much better machine. They can get everybody to vote, especially, they can almost get them all to the polls.
Yeah.
If you can just get them to sign a dang envelope and put it in the mail,
yep.
Now they're very, very good at it. And so the right better learn. Better learn politics if you want to be competitive, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
It sure seems like there's got to be a technology solution to it, that I mail in my ballot or go vote in person, and I get something back that says, here's how you voted, here's how I voted. So there's nothing that changes in the system, or random sampling or something. I just feel like there's...
Well, in Colorado, we can look up our vote. That doesn't mean, that is the vote that was cast, but it's the vote that we can see that we voted. So Colorado does have a system where if you want to track your vote, they'll tell you, yeah, we received it at the...
No, the results of your vote. Like, I voted for Trump. It comes back and says, yes, you voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, my worry is that if you mail something in and somebody is changing on the other end, and I don't have that much of a worry, but I feel like that would allay other people's worries.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And you're right. We need voter integrity. Yeah. If there's nothing to hide, let's fix it.
Yep.
I agree. I know some of my right-wing friends are not going to be happy with how I feel right now about Dominion, and I love my pillow. Don't get me wrong. We've got two of them. It's actually not that good of a pillow, but I like the guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So Cheryl orders them like crazy. We hate the stupid things, but we want to support him.
You gonna get a hog pillow? Yeah.
Oh yes. Well, I got to be fair, right? Yeah. Is he doing pillows?
Isn't he the?
Are you talking about Hogg, the Parkland shooter activist student that turned activist?
Yeah.
I didn't know he was doing pillows.
I think he's trying to compete with my pillow.
Hey, you got to emulate somebody that's successful, right?
Yeah.
That's great. So we haven't really touched on the most important subject yet. What are you doing to be less white? Because that's what's happening this week. In the evolution of political correctness to white guilt to cancel culture to wokeism, we are now at a place where it's incumbent upon all of us, and you are my brother, but I'm not 100% sure how white you are. I think you're mostly white.
Mostly white, yep.
And are you working to reduce that a little bit?
Yeah, we all have to. It's not something you can just say, I'm colorblind. Everyone's got to work towards being less white. Be more into people's color.
So at what point do we be less white before we begin to culturally appropriate? Like if I just start wearing sombreros, now what am I?
It's a tough one. We don't have a culture, so where can we go with our non-white culture? without appropriating. Yeah, I mean, the whole, I mean, I guess it started, I guess, before BLM riots, but that's where it really amplified that. And that's what really irritates me. I mean, you can get, like or dislike Trump, like dislike Biden, but that's not as infuriating to me as the whole woke activism along racial lines.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I really worry about our future, my kids' future.
No, I agree. All joking aside, cancel culture, this postmodernism that has infiltrated our society and the West. When I say our society, I don't mean just America. In fact, we're still sort of Neanderthal compared to, in some ways. In some ways, we're more woke. It's a weird thing, the United States. But really, where did this postmodernism, this rise of cancel culture, how did we get here? Like, I mean, I remember 20 years ago, political correctness and these kinds of things. But man, now we are fully immersed in this, right?
Yeah.
How did we get here, and what do we do now?
So, I think, I don't know the chicken, the egg in this, but I feel like one problem is that we as a society, culture, our generations are so far removed from hardship that we don't know what it's like to, say slightly after post-World War I or II, that those Great Depression, that those people knew hardship and they wanted to work hard and they didn't have time for that kind of thing. And so I feel like we're too far removed from hardship and we have too much free time and money on our hands that your average person in America or Western culture has the free time to care about things, amplified by, and I feel like really the greatest problem in culture these days, society, is social media. So that's why the rise
of social media has definitely accelerated this movement, this whatever it is, this cultural shift.
Yep.
But I think you bring up a good point. It's when, and this isn't the first time in history that this has happened. It may be the best example, but affluence, extreme affluence, for a couple or a few generations breeds this weird kind of self-loathing thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think it's also kind of combined a little bit with atheism, and I'm an atheist, that you need to fill your hole with something. And I think a lot of people feel like I'm doing good by doing this. And there's also, I don't know if it's the same thing or a similar thing, but with social media, Twitter and Facebook, and people get in their echo chambers, if you will, that my team is doing this, I care about my team. It's a team.
Oh man, there's so much of that.
Yeah, and tribalism.
Tribalism.
It's kind of like sports. You have your team, but people think it's so much more serious, and maybe it is with politics or social things, that you form your team on social media and you're fighting against that, and that kind of is the hole you're feeling with having lack of, I don't know, community or religion.
Yeah, I'd like to get back to that because I think that groupthink and tribalism is eventually going to sink the left. And we can talk about that. They're pretty united right now, but you already see, who was one of the Kardashians? Kendall Jenner just came out with 818 tequila. Did you hear about this? She's one of the most wokest white people on earth, right?
Yeah.
Like, she won't date a white man. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So now they're after her because she's got a tequila brand.
Yeah.
Like, who does she think she is?
Yeah.
So I think that, listen, if you're on the left, be careful because they're coming after you. I mean, they're already after me, but they're going to eventually, the victim hierarchy, you're going to be pushed down, right?
Oh, it's a race, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, African Americans for a long time enjoyed the top of this hierarchy that the left pretends to champion.
Yeah.
Of course they didn't, and blacks are waking up to that, thank God. But so now that's not good enough anymore, right? I mean, Islam is above that, and BLM. Hey, it doesn't matter what your skin color is if you believe in the movement, which is a neo-Marxist movement by any stretch.
Yeah, I mean, it's the intersectionalism. If you can score as many points, check as many boxes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So maybe the left is going to eat itself. I don't know. We're a ways away from that. Right now they're enjoying this mob where they have a lot of power.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So we talk about how affluence kind of breeds this into a culture. We're the richest society on earth. the richest nation, and we see second, third generation of affluent people who are just full of guilt and and have no motivation. They've never struggled.
Yep.
Humans need to struggle. You're right about that.
Yep.
But what about postmodernism being taught in the universities now for over 100 years? I mean, all of that kind of plays into this, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly universities don't teach wisdom, and that's a problem. And if you look at the BLM riots, and that's where you can see that combination, that it's not mostly poor black people doing the BLM riots, it's rich white 20-year-olds who are in the middle of college or just getting out of college, that they just have so much free time on their hands and a Twitter handle that, and especially if you're a liberal arts major at a private university and you got a whole bunch of money, I mean, that's a recipe to be a woke leftist without meaning, and that's how you think you're going to find your meaning.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know where it's all going. It is scary.
Yep.
And the ironic thing, when we're dealing with cancel culture and postmodernism and neo-feminism, because feminism is dead.
Yeah.
Now neo-feminism is alive and well, and people who pretend to be feminists are now championing mixed martial artists who are pummeling the hell out of women because the guy identifies as a woman.
Yep.
And then the Biden administration, I'm not sure, there's been a couple of executive orders, these kinds of things that have really moved rapidly in that direction at university, at minor league sports, even at the professional level. Scary stuff, man.
Well, I care more. I mean, it's all bad, but like high school sports or college, I get, but high school sports, you're a girl who's pretty good in high school sports and you're good at whatever soccer, and now you're competing against boys who are girls now.
Yeah.
That's where like the numbers are a lot greater. The problem is a lot greater. Wrestling that you get. So.
I read an article, and this has been a while back, 6 or 7 months ago, about Serena Williams, arguably the greatest female tennis player of all time. The author of this article used statistics to back up his assertion that over 3,000 male high school athletes are better tennis players than she is.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, same with soccer. I mean, when women's national soccer team.
I'm sorry. I think I said high school, college.
Yeah.
College tennis players.
And I think it finally ended, but women's national soccer team, how they're suing whatever soccer association for equal pay for the men, because they've won, however many World Cups and gold medals in the Olympics, and they are for women better than the men's team, but they routinely get beat by good high school teams. So, and that's not even the important thing. The more important thing is they should get paid what the revenue they bring in. So, like, women's soccer brings almost no money into the league compared to the men's teams, especially at the World Cup level. Like, World Cup women bring like zero revenue compared to World Cup men, and they
are the top of the sports world, really.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
However many gazillions of dollars go to the men's World Cup, and in the United States, we kind of care about women's World Cup because our team is good, but I mean, still nobody watches it here, and they bring in tens of millions of dollars versus billions of dollars for men's. The economics don't work to pay women the same. You can't have equal pay for. It's not equal pay for equal work. It's you get paid according to how much revenue you can bring into your organization.
That's right. That's economics. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's called the sad truth.
Yep.
Yeah. So, what are we drinking?
Four Roses small batch. It's awesome.
This is pretty good.
Yeah.
I've been trying to watch my figure, and I haven't really had a drink, and I haven't had much to eat today, so this is warming me up pretty good.
Well, I'm ready for my refill. This is the barrel-aged Manhattan.
All right. Well, I'm going to try and catch up, and then I can't wait. You make this at home.
Yeah, this has been aging for a few months, but it's in a used barrel. I've been aging for like a year, so this is more the equivalent of maybe a month of aging.
All right. So tell me what goes into a barrel-aged Manhattan like this.
Well, a Manhattan in general, 2 parts whiskey, in this case rye. So 2 parts rye, 1 part vermouth. Key is a good vermouth, so that's Carpano Antica. And then bitters. I think there's a little bit of orange bitters and aromatic bitters in that one.
You put everything in the barrel.
Put it all in there, seal it up.
Is this like bourbon? Is this like a charred white oak barrel, or is this just a...
It's a charred, yeah, it's a charred, unused but charred oak barrel.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and you are kind of the king of these drinks, so I'm looking forward to that.
Ooh, that's good. I haven't had this batch in a while. That's good.
Yeah. Honest opinion, should Ted Cruz be hanged for going to Cancun?
I can't believe that made such big news. Like, I mean, I don't like Ted Cruz. Like, he is such a punchable face. He has his moments, policy-wise or what he says. I don't dislike him, but it doesn't help he has such a punchable face. But yeah, I mean, the media certainly ran with that one. Compare that to Democratic mayors or governors who are going against their COVID, going to get a haircut or going to the gym or whatever, and that get squashed. And this deal they're making, it's not even that big a deal. I mean, yeah, I guess he should have hung around Texas, but
honestly, what could he have done?
Yeah, he could hand out water at the. Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of rich guys in Texas that said, I'm going to Cancun because we've got a friggin' crazy deep freeze.
Yeah.
And I get the optics are bad. And, maybe as a U.S. Senator, you ought to stick around and do community outreach or whatever. Maybe it's part of the job. I get the argument for that.
Yeah.
But in reality, there's nothing he really could have done. I mean, he doesn't have any control over, the utility companies. And even if you do, they were screwed. Like, just a crazy thing. But you're right. The hypocrisy is just amazing in this country. The what the left gets away with compared to the right is insane.
Yep.
So let's go back on that, because I am a constitutional conservative who is, I would have to say, a Republican, and the reason for that is because that's how I vote. I vote mostly Republican because I vote entirely Republican. I did vote for Lily Tang Williams for United States Senate. But I vote mostly Republican because I feel like there really are only two options. And so you feel like you're a little more of a libertarian kind of guy.
Yep.
And I think we're not too far off, because I'm pretty libertarian too when it comes to social issues, things like that.
Yep.
I don't care if you and your gay husband smoke pot and shoot guns. Wonderful.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So that's a pretty libertarian point of view. I have a hard time entering the fray as a libertarian activist because I think the Libertarian Party is feckless.
Yeah.
Completely has no chance. So that's kind of where I come down. And also abortion and drugs and borders, I part with the libertarian on those three things. Not entirely, but more than the libertarian platform would suggest.
Yep.
So are you a guy that votes libertarian?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, I voted for Trump, but it was to me, it's more important to vote anti-leftist than it was to vote libertarian.
Yeah, that was a vote against what was happening in the streets of all of our major cities and across the country.
Yep. So in a normal year for presidential election, I'll vote for libertarian because, for the most part, no one's vote matters. Your vote doesn't matter, my vote doesn't matter for the president, especially depending what state you're in. But a libertarian vote does help. It can help because there's a special number, 5% number, you get matching campaign contribution. So that's where it adds up, and it can help. That's one reason. And that's the same reason I voted for Trump. That I felt like every vote for Trump was, to try to keep it too lopsided as my hope. The other thing is, I have a hard time if there's no other choice. When I'm looking down my ballot, if there's only Democrat and Republican, which it usually is, I'm going to vote for the Republican.
That's good.
Oh yeah,
that's good.
But I just feel Republicans, in theory, are almost exactly aligned with me. In practice, they're terrible. Like
You mean they don't follow through on their platform on what they say they're going to do?
Yeah. So
I think every conservative Republican is frustrated with that, for sure.
Yeah. So your average Republican voter, I probably am 95% aligned with. Your average Republican politician, probably almost 0% aligned with. I mean, Trump, for example.
But doesn't the Republican Party need a big tent to be competitive? Don't we need the Lisa Murkowskis, the Rand Pauls, and the Lindsey Grahams
to be competitive with Democrats?
To be a national party that has a big enough tent to bring enough voters into the party to be competitive with a Democrat Party that I think is on the verge of taking over American politics, unless they crumble, like I alluded on earlier.
Yeah.
And they might.
Well, so Republicans have been in speech, but not really in deed, putting up a good fight against wokeism and leftism. But too many are silent on that. Yeah. But in terms of like the normal politics, rewind like 5 years ago when we were talking about taxes and kind of, 10 years ago, something like that. Republicans they want just as big a government as Republican politicians. Republican politicians want or actually implement as big a government as Democrats do.
Yeah.
It's maybe slightly shade. Trump, and this is like where I have a problem with Trump supporters who previously were Republicans and cared about smaller government and small spending. Mm-hmm. Trump had $1 trillion deficit. I mean, he pushed $1 trillion deficit before COVID. I feel like there's hardly a peep out of Republicans.
Yeah.
Didn't you? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, he's a big spender, and I've tried to. I have a problem with that too, by the way, and I have a problem with big government. Again, Trump's not a conservative per se.
Right.
We can get into tariffs and other taxes too. So plain devil's advocate, a Trump supporter would argue that the nation, the infrastructure, the problems that we had were so big that the crumbling military needed that kind of infusion. And I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's the argument for the Trump doctrine. And again, Trump is a big spender, and I'm not happy about that.
Yeah.
But that's the argument to be made, and there is some argument there that the infrastructure was so bad, that the military was so depleted, that an infusion of money. But you're right. I don't think Trump ever, portrayed himself as a fiscal conservative. I think he said, "Hey, America's big enough, strong enough, mighty enough that if we get our asses moving again, get our butts in gear again, we can overcome it. We can become the world's greatest power again, or we can at least maintain that. We can repair our infrastructure." He didn't do much of, by the way.
Yeah.
For you Trump supporters out there, he didn't do any of it.
Well, but he also promised that he was going to reduce the reduce the debt and have no longer deficit spending in his early campaign.
Well,
that went out the window.
Well, it did, but I'm not sure he's promised that he would reduce the debt and deficit so much. He promised that he would reduce the size, reach, and scope of government, and he did implement policies like 2 government programs would have to be eliminated for every new one, and he eliminated a lot of waste.
Yep.
Why the spending didn't follow that is probably systemic and complex, but
he didn't push. He did nothing to push. So that's when the 2 great things he did were reducing regulation, and that's when I have to rely, I guess, on the news for that. I mean, I couldn't name those specific regulations, but I think everyone agrees, left and right, that he reduced regulations.
Yeah.
So that's good. The other big thing is,
and he also cut a lot of red tape for infrastructure and things like pipelines, and he made America energy independent for the first time in about 70 years, I think.
Yeah, was that him?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was directly. It was making it easy for big oil to operate, and that's what resulted in the boom. And fracking permits, hydraulic drilling permits, pipelines, these kinds of things did all result in that.
Yeah. So the biggest thing he did, and this is, why I would almost vote for him again, even though he's 9 out of the 10 things he does I don't like, but the one so huge thing is that he reduced our foreign intervention, the endless war thing.
Yeah.
Or at least didn't amplify it anymore. And
first president not to get us entangled in a foreign war in how many? I don't remember. It's like it's like the last 20 presidents or something.
Yeah. And that's so huge. But that's also why I can't really get on board with the crumbling military or spending more in the military. And part of it's really that because I want to bring everybody home. But also, it's my analogy is minimum wage. I'm against setting minimum wages
because we know the real minimum wage is zero.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's the contract between the employee and the employer. Yeah. But the other thing is when people who support the minimum wage will throw $15. Like, why $15? Why not $20? Why not $25? That all makes.
Why not $1,000 an hour for every American, unless you can do better than that, and then we're all rich. Yeah. That's the fundamental flaw in that ridiculous thinking.
Yep.
Yeah, it's arbitrary. It's arbitrary, and there are market consequences. So, yeah.
So I'd love to talk about minimum wage, but I feel like my analogy to that with military spending, Republicans often say we need to spend more on military. I bet 95% of Republicans couldn't say, well, how much do we spend now? And how do you know we need to spend more? It just seems like a phantom thing. It's like the equivalent of minimum wage. Well, just more minimum wage, just more government military spending. Well,
I don't think we need to spend more on government. I think we need to know what we're spending, what we're wasting, and fix the spending. And then I think we do need to spend appropriate levels, and I think it's probably a big number. But other than that, I'm not smart enough to understand. But you're right, to just say we have to spend more on military, well, that's silly because we need to first know where the waste, fraud, and abuse is, because we know with everything in government, there's tons of it.
Yep.
But we are falling behind. It's funny because I actually had Elon Musk booked to come here tonight.
Yeah.
And when I found out you could do the show, I bumped it.
Oh yeah. Yep. Priorities.
SpaceX is going to take the United States back into space. We're going to finally have our own shuttle bus to go up to the International Space Station.
Yeah.
I don't know how many Americans don't realize this. We don't have a bus. Yeah. We hitch rides with the Chinese and the Russians to get up to the dang space station, because that's how far behind we are after the Challenger and Discovery atrocities.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm all for renting rides.
Taking a ride with the Russians?
Yeah, I mean, we'll let them spend the money, but even better, like, I mean, it's great that private enterprise, SpaceX, or actually Amazon guy, Bezos, he has his own deal too. I feel like all the rich guys got their own, space exploration.
Yeah, well,
deals.
He wants to do like space tours or something, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I think he has some kind of commercial application to it too, but. And in SpaceX with the reusable launchers on it, it's like 10% or whatever it was of NASA doing it.
Yeah.
So I love that. I mean, that's better. But before we had SpaceX, I'm all for government renting rides rather than spending a gazillion wasteful dollars on space shuttles.
Yeah, I guess my gut instinct is it's a shame that the United States of America has to hitch rides, but you're right. But you're right. Why not? They got a bus going. Let's catch a ride with them. No, that's interesting. I don't know. You're a dad. Your kids are a little younger than mine. What does their future look like, man? Is it hopeful?
It is. I mean, all the negative things we talked about. It's easy to get kind of bogged down in the details of here's all the negative things happening culturally or socially or governmentally. But when you look at the trajectory of humanity, I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm torn on technology. Technology is good and evil.
Yep.
But it's also made so many things great. The real struggle is going to be, I am 99% confident that their lives, our next generation, the generation of that, their lives will be easier. As we talked about before, you need some hardship in your life. Their lives will be easier. Will it be richer and more fulfilling? I don't know. I'm skeptical about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I tell my kids who are in their 20s is that because they're, the last year has been tough, right? It's been an interesting time in human history.
Yeah.
We tend to feel sorry for ourselves a little bit because we've had such great times, and all of a sudden we have this bump in the road that's been significant. I don't want to downplay it, but 200 years ago, you had 12 kids and 11 of them died.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, but again, that's not fair because they have encountered something that has been very difficult. Maybe that's good, right? Maybe a little adversity will toughen these guys up a little bit and let them understand that tomorrow's not promised, that the world is not easy. But on that note, I think the most fortunate generation of humans to have ever inhabited planet Earth was our parents' generation in the United States of America.
I agree with that.
By far. And it's not even close. If you look at the history of the world, history of humanity, history of civilization, it is a history of extreme difficulty and hardship and starvation and disease. And people don't know that anymore, right? Nobody learns that. But what you hope for is that every generation in the West gets a little bit better. I think you and I live in the second best time ever in the history of the world, right?
Yep.
So what I'm worried about is our kids will live in the third. And they probably will.
Yep.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean,
I'd like them to live in the first best time.
Yeah.
And I don't see that happening.
I hear you.
But they should be grateful that they live in the third best,
for sure.
best time ever in the history of the world.
Yeah, they're living
and in some ways the best. I mean, I know people who go, well, so what's the best time to have ever inhabited Earth? And there are so many people who go, well, now, clearly. And that's an easy argument to make. It really is. I disagree. I think it was 1950 through 2000, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, what's the definition of better?
Yeah.
I think most people will put it in terms of what's easier or what makes life easier. I don't think that's what makes it better. I mean, you have to add that richness to it or fulfillingness to it, and I agree. That's why I think our parents' generation was the best time.
We may live in the best time for getting 1,000 calories for $10.
Yeah.
Right, but we don't live in the best time for overall fulfillment. Mixed with prosperity, affluence.
Yep.
The invention of cars and air conditioning and heaters and all of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and just so few people now and going forward, especially, so like you said, our kids, maybe they're the third best generation or whatever. It's still like the top 0.001% in America, especially 0.001% of humanity ever. Like life's great. But I mean, that generation, each generation after ours will have more leisure time, but that breeds problems.
Maybe. No, I think I see where you're going with this, and I think you're probably right. Like, we could get to a point, if things go one way, where, people don't have to work very hard and they still have lots of affluence.
Yep.
I see that. I see that as a very real possibility.
Yep.
Right?
And human brains aren't wired to deal with that very well. I mean,
that's a good
maybe
point.
The top 10%, top's not the word, but 10% of humans can effectively deal with their leisure time and make it productive and live a fulfilling life out of that. 90%.
Most people wallow in sorrow, even though they have such great.
Yeah, they're going to go join the BLM ride.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, gosh, that's crazy stuff, man. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, you have to push yourself. That's how lucky we are that I have to push myself. Like, I got to work out harder. Like, force myself to read books or whatever.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough hardship in my life. I got to make myself a better person. I got to force it. Like, not many people are going to do that. And you have your.
Yeah.
Most people aren't going to bring that upon themselves to.
Yeah.
And that's why raising your kids, you got to. How do you implement hardship on your kids in the way that's...
Right. Yeah. It goes against our nature as parents. I mean, what are we going to do,
Yep.
Okay, it's February. You got to sleep outside for a couple weeks.
Yep.
It would be good for them, right?
It would be good for them.
It would be totally good for them.
Yep.
Here's a flint and steel. Here's a flashlight.
Yeah.
Go live in the backyard, know. Couple of MREs. No, that's good stuff. So, I don't want to go back to Trump. Just quickly, is he done?
Being a president
as
or
a candidate,
influencer?
As a candidate.
Yeah,
He's certainly not done as an influencer in the party.
I agree with that.
Is he done as a candidate? Is he coming back in 2024?
I bet he will. He's not a young
No, he has
guy.
to go through a primary process if he does, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's better than just having him be the guy, I think.
Yeah. He could win. I mean, he's very spry for an old dude, but still another 4 or 5 years away. But he'd be, I mean, how old?
He'll be 78. He'll be a badass at 78.
Yeah.
I don't worry about that at all. The guy doesn't drink, which, kind of
That's why I don't trust him.
Kind of makes him a weirdo. Cheers. Yeah, I don't know. So there's a very good chance that 3 or 4 people will see this.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? What's the one thing that you'd like for them to take away, from your perspective, you as a modern American man, a white man, cisgendered, all that, you got all that going for you. What's the one thing that you just want people to know? Like, future generations watch this video. They're going, man, the beginning of 2021 was a crazy time for Western society. Here's a couple of regular Joes having some whiskey. What's important?
I mean, I think we touched on it. I think for people now, don't do so much social media. I think it's bad for society.
I'm really bad at that.
I know.
I'm all over social media. But anyway.
Facebook
think, puts me in jail. I open a new account.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
I think it's bad for society. I think that's what's causing a divide. But I think it's also bad for one as an individual. It's easy. I mean, I've gotten sucked into it, here and there, and that's why I don't even do it. It's easy to get caught up in fights. Either you're in your tribe and it's the echo chamber, or you're battling the other side.
Yeah.
And then you're up at late at night, like, thinking about those fights. I'm going to say this. I should have said that. It's not healthy for one as an individual. There's the kumbaya society, like, let's not do that so we can all get together. But beyond that, just as one individual, like, if you're on social media too much, like, just be happy and don't get caught up in all. And 24/7 news is another problem related to social media. Like,
there's no news anymore. News is gone.
Well, I'm kind of somewhat addicted to my phone news, like, or whatever, even if it's conservative or liberal, whatever you got, that you're always fed things that really don't matter, but it's easy to get outraged by that news. And
you're, if the technocrats are watching you, which they are,
yep,
you're also fed things that reinforce your preconceived notions.
Correct.
That's why we have so many. That's why when you talk about social media and you talk about tribalism and groupthink and these kinds of things, and man, everybody's guilty of it. This isn't
Correct.
A left or right thing.
That's true.
This is, and you see on Facebook or Twitter or any of these social media sites where people are, constantly Googling something that just supports their opinion.
Yep.
And it's like, quit that. Like, I do it too, but in this environment, you have to look at so much information to form your own opinion, to get down to first principle thinking about stuff.
Yes.
It's hard for everybody.
Yep.
I think you're right. I think that's what we have to stop. Let's quit being a part of these tribes, man.
Yes.
Although it's difficult as a rightist. Man, I'm pissed at leftists.
Yes.
You talk about the BLM mobs, the Antifa mobs. They piss me off bad.
Yep.
Badly. Like, yep. I don't want this shit for my kids.
Yep.
I don't want my capital destroyed.
Yep.
And yet, if a restaurateur wants to have 10 people in the damn restaurant.
Yeah.
But you're right. Back to the point. I think you hit on it. For future generations, we got to stop this tribalism crap, man, and start thinking for ourselves.
Yeah, and same thing, said a different way. It's what's the underlying issue at hand, and not who said it or who did it. I feel like too many people Team R or Team D said this thing. Oh, therefore I don't even really care what the X they did is.
Yeah.
If Team D did X, I don't like it. If Team R did X, well, I like it, or at least I'm going to be neutral, or vice versa.
And we've even seen people switch dramatically.
Yeah. Well, that's the
lately,
hypocrisy.
based on their team, right?
Yes.
Come on, be consistent in your convictions, man, and your values.
Yep.
If your team is not on board with with what you legitimately feel is a value that is important,
yep,
then call your team out.
Yes. Yep. Oh man, hypocrisy makes me. I mean, you see it way more on the left because just the news and that's.
I agree.
And so it's easy,
the left will disagree with us. They'll say, "Oh no, the right is just as bad."
Yeah.
Okay, let's agree that they're both bad. The left is worse. Period.
Yep.
It's a fact, but they're both bad.
Yeah, I would rather people instead of just agree that they're all bad. You know, especially at the politician level. Team R is bad. Team D is bad. They're just all bad. They're out for themselves. You know, that's the nature of the human beast.
Yeah.
And they're not out for you, and so you got to fight them. They're all bad, and don't worry about if it's Team R, Team D, or Team any. Just what are they actually saying? What do they actually mean? What do they actually do? And do you care about that thing and not who said that thing?
Yeah. All right. I think we come back and do another show.
Yeah.
My brother Ryan. Good talk, man. We could go on for a long time, but it was great to have you. I really appreciate your opinions.
Yeah. Appreciate yours, Mike.
You know, you've always been my smart little brother that I listen to a lot, and it means a lot, man. Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again.
All right. Good night, y'all.